In the heart of the Ashanti kingdom, nestled deep within the golden savanna, there was a legend that had haunted the people for generations. It spoke of a dragon, not of scales and claws, but of fire and fury, whose roars could shake the heavens. This beast had terrorized villages, set entire fields ablaze, and reduced thriving towns to smoldering ruins. The Ashanti people feared this mighty creature, whose presence in the skies was a harbinger of doom. Its very name was enough to send a chill down the spine of even the bravest warriors. Ephraim, the Ashanti dragon. No warrior had ever faced the beast and returned. The elders, once hopeful that a hero would arise, began to whisper that perhaps no one could defeat the dragon. They spoke in hushed tones, the myth growing darker with each telling. Yet among them stood a young hunter, Omoruyi, whose heart burned with a different fire, one of courage, resolve, and unwavering belief. From his childhood, Omoruyi had heard of the dragon's terror, but it was not fear that grew in his heart, but a longing to end the reign of terror once and for all. Omoruyi was no ordinary hunter. Raised in a village known for producing the fiercest warriors and most skilled trackers, he had trained since a young age under his father, the village chief. Omoruyi's strength and cunning were unmatched, but it was his unwavering sense of justice and desire to protect his people that set him apart. When the time came, Omoruyi approached the village elders, stating with conviction, "I will tame the dragon." The elders were skeptical, their faces etched with worry. "Omoruyi, the dragon is beyond mortal strength. It is a force of nature, a terror that none can defeat. Why risk your life?" But Omoruyi's gaze never wavered. "I will not run from fear," he said simply. "I will face it, not as a conqueror, but as one who seeks to understand it." This bold declaration would mark the beginning of Omoruyi's legendary journey. A journey that would take him to the edge of death itself, and perhaps into a new world of understanding, where bravery, wisdom, and compassion could tame even the fiercest of beasts. Omoruyi knew that defeating the Ashanti dragon was no simple task. The stories told of the beast's immense power, its fire capable of reducing entire villages to ashes in moments, its claws as sharp as the mountainside rocks, and its wings that could stir hurricanes. But it was not just the dragon's physical prowess that concerned Omoruyi, it was its mind. It was said that the Ashanti dragon was not only fierce but intelligent, a creature of ancient power and knowledge. Omoruyi would need more than strength. He would need cunning, strategy, and an understanding of the dragon's ways. To prepare, he sought the counsel of the village elders, who had lived through the dragon's reign and learned secrets of survival. "The dragon feeds on fear," one elder warned. "It senses the hearts of men and attacks those who show weakness, but if you stand firm, without doubt or hesitation, it may not see you as prey." The words rang in Omoruyi's mind as he began his training. For days he tracked the wild animals of the savannah, hunting fierce beasts with the quiet precision of a shadow. He trained in the art of stealth, learning to move without making a sound, to read the wind, and to anticipate the movements of creatures far more dangerous than any he had faced before. Every night he meditated under the stars, drawing strength from the quiet beauty of the world around him, preparing his heart for the battle ahead. Omoruyi's days were long and grueling, but his resolve only grew stronger. He could feel the weight of his mission. He was not just a hunter, he was the last hope of his people. Each lesson, each moment of training, was a step closer to the dragon's lair. The legend of the Ashanti dragon was about to meet its match. On the eve of his departure, Omoruyi stood at the edge of the village, looking out at the horizon where the mountain stood, the mountain of shadows, home to the beast. He was ready. He did not fear the dragon. He feared only the failure to protect his people. And so, with nothing but his weapons, his wits, and his courage, Omoruyi set forth on a journey that would change the fate of his kingdom forever. The mountain of shadows loomed like a dark titan against the sky. Its jagged peaks were wrapped in a thick mist, and its slopes were treacherous, filled with narrow ledges and hidden crevices. Legends told of strange creatures that dwelled in its depths, beasts that had adapted to the harsh environment, making it impossible for anyone to reach the dragon's lair without facing death. As Omoruyi approached the mountain's base, the air grew colder and the sky darkened. The wind howled through the rocky crags, carrying with it an eerie whisper, as if the mountain itself were alive and watching him. The closer Omoruyi got to the summit, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. But he did not falter. He had faced dangers before. This would not be his undoing. For days he climbed the mountain's rugged slopes, each step bringing him closer to the dragon's lair. The mountain seemed to resist his every move, as if it were an ancient guardian, intent on preventing him from reaching the top. But Omoruyi's determination was unyielding. The memories of his people, of the suffering they endured under the dragon's reign, fueled him with every step. He could not turn back. He would not turn back. On the fourth night of his journey, as Omoruyi camped on a narrow ledge, he felt a strange sensation, an ominous pressure in the air. His instincts, honed from years of hunting, screamed at him to stay alert. From the darkness of the mountain, something stirred. With the flash of a moment, the air around him erupted with a deafening roar. Omoruyi's heart raced as he turned eyes wide to face the source of the sound. The dragon was near. As the mist cleared, Omoruyi saw a shadow in the distance, larger than any beast he had ever encountered. It was the Ashanti dragon, its eyes burning with a ferocity that seemed to pierce the very soul. Its wings spread across the sky like the shadow of a storm. It was watching him. Omoruyi drew his bow, his hand steady despite the fierce adrenaline rushing through his veins. The dragon's massive form loomed before him, its eyes burning with ancient fury. For a moment, Omoruyi and the dragon locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. This was not just a battle of strength, it was a clash of wills. The dragon let out a terrifying roar, shaking the very ground beneath Omoruyi's feet. With a powerful beat of its wings, the dragon surged forward, its fiery breath lighting up the dark sky. Omoruyi barely had time to react, diving to the side as a wall of flame engulfed the space where he had stood moments before. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained clear. He had trained for this moment. Omoruyi sprang to his feet, his eyes scanning the dragon for any weakness. Its scales were like molten metal, shimmering and impenetrable. The heat radiating from its body was enough to burn a man to ash in seconds. But Omoruyi had come prepared. He had studied the legends of the dragon, learning that despite its power it was not invincible. There was a gap in its scales, just beneath its left wing. It was small, but it was there. With a deep breath, Omoruyi pulled an arrow from his quiver and knocked it to his bow. The dragon charged again, its mouth wide, ready to unleash another fiery attack. This time, Omoruyi was ready. As the dragon closed the distance, Omoruyi took aim at the weak spot beneath its scales. He released the arrow with deadly precision. The arrow flew through the air, but the dragon's scales were tougher than he had anticipated. The arrow struck with a resounding clang, deflecting off the beast's hide. The dragon roared in pain, but it was not defeated. It was angry, furious. It circled above Omoruyi, preparing to strike again. Omoruyi knew that brute force alone would not win this fight. He had to outwit the dragon, understand its behavior, and find a way to exploit its weaknesses. The battle had only just begun, and Omoruyi's mind was already at work, calculating his next move. Omoruyi had barely any time to catch his breath before the dragon attacked again, this time with even greater fury. It soared into the air, its massive wings creating gusts of wind that nearly knocked Omoruyi off his feet. The dragon's eyes blazed with rage, and with a roar, it unleashed another stream of fire that illuminated the mountain like a second sun. Omoruyi leapt backward, narrowly avoiding the inferno. He could feel the heat licking at his skin, the flames searing the air around him. His instincts screamed at him to run, to seek shelter, but he remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing. The key to defeating the dragon, he realized, was not to outmuscle it, but to outmaneuver it. The dragon's strength was its fire, its wings, and its sheer size. But Omoruyi was smaller, faster, and more agile. The battle had become a deadly dance, one where every move, every step, could mean life or death. Omoruyi dodged another wave of fire, diving to the side and rolling to his feet. His movements were fluid, his body responding to the dragon's every attack with precision. He had learned to read the rhythm of the beast, anticipating its fiery breath and the thunderous beat of its wings. With each near miss, he grew more confident. He was not just reacting anymore, he was in control. But the dragon was relentless. With each failed attempt to strike him down, the beast became more determined. Omoruyi could see the anger growing in the dragon's eyes, the flames burning hotter, more intense. The ground beneath his feet trembled as the dragon landed, its claws digging into the mountain's rocky surface. Omoruyi had a choice: face the dragon head-on, or wait for the right moment. His mind flashed back to the wisdom of the elders, who had warned him that the key to survival was patience. He took a deep breath and held his ground, waiting for the dragon to make the first move. When it did, Omoruyi was ready. As the dragon lunged toward him with jaws wide, he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the snapping teeth. In that instant, he saw his opportunity, the gap in the dragon's scales beneath its left wing, just as he had remembered. Omoruyi didn't hesitate. He reached for his spear, and, with a swift and practiced motion, hurled it toward the weak spot. The spear pierced the dragon's scales, sending a shock of pain through the creature. The dragon howled, its wings flapping wildly as it staggered back, disoriented. For the first time in the battle, it faltered. Omoruyi had struck its pride, and its weakness. The dragon recoiled, its wings flapping violently, as it took to the air again. Omoruyi watched as the creature circled above him, its fiery breath crackling in the air like the roar of a storm. The beast was enraged, its pride wounded, and it would stop at nothing to annihilate the hunter who had dared to challenge it. Omoruyi's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained calm. He had drawn blood from the beast, and that meant it was vulnerable. The dragon was no longer an unstoppable force of nature. It had become a wounded animal, desperate to protect itself. Omoruyi had to capitalize on this weakness. The ground shook beneath him as the dragon swooped down, its massive form casting a shadow over the mountaintop. Omoruyi had only a moment to react. He dashed to the side as the dragon unleashed another burst of fire. The flames scorched the earth, turning rocks to ash in mere seconds. Omoruyi's instincts kicked in, and he dove behind a large boulder, using it as cover. The dragon roared in frustration, its wings beating the air like thunder. Omoruyi knew that he had to act quickly. The beast was growing more unpredictable by the minute, and soon its rage would consume it entirely. But Omoruyi wasn't about to let that happen. He had a plan, and it was time to put it into action. He noticed the dragon's fiery breath had started to become erratic, its flames flickering in intensity. It seemed to be struggling, as though the wound from his spear had left it disoriented. Omoruyi realized that the creature's fire was tied to its own energy, its rage fueled its flames. And if he could find a way to calm that rage, perhaps he could weaken the dragon. With this new insight, Omoruyi gathered his courage and prepared to confront the beast again. The key to taming the dragon was not brute force, but understanding and control. He had already wounded the dragon physically, but now he needed to wound its spirit. And the best way to do that was not to fight fire with fire, but to fight fire with peace. Omoruyi knew that to tame the dragon, he had to understand its heart. And so, he approached the dragon once more, this time with a different mindset. He did not charge at it with his weapons drawn, or with anger in his heart. Instead, he approached slowly, his hands open in a gesture of peace, his eyes filled with compassion. The dragon watched him warily, its massive form still trembling with rage, but there was something in Omoruyi's eyes, something that made the beast hesitate. Omoruyi had learned from his mentors that all creatures, no matter how fierce or dangerous, had a vulnerability. It was not a physical weakness, but a spiritual one. The dragon, like all beings, had its fears and its pains. Omoruyi knew that if he could reach the dragon's soul, he could tame its fury. In the silence of the mountain, Omoruyi began to chant softly, the ancient words of his people echoing through the air. The chants were old, passed down through generations, and they spoke not of battle, but of understanding and respect. They were words meant to connect the hunter to the hunted, the human to the beast. As Omoruyi chanted, he slowly inched closer to the dragon, watching carefully for any sign of movement. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Omoruyi thought it might attack. But then, something incredible happened. The flames that had been crackling in the dragon's throat subsided. The dragon took a deep breath, its massive chest rising and falling, as if it were listening. Omoruyi continued to chant, his voice steady and calm. The air around them seemed to change, the tension lifting, and the dragon's body relaxed. For the first time in the battle, Omoruyi could see the dragon not as a fierce enemy, but as a creature burdened by its own power, trapped in its own fury. The dragon had not sought to destroy the village out of malice. It had done so because it had been driven to madness by its own strength. It had been alone for centuries, with no one to challenge or understand it. And now, in this moment, Omoruyi had reached it. The dragon lowered its head, its fiery eyes dimming. It seemed to understand that Omoruyi was not here to destroy it, but to offer a different way. Slowly, Omoruyi reached out, his hand trembling, and touched the dragon's massive forehead. The beast did not recoil. Instead, it closed its eyes, a low rumble vibrating from its chest. It was the sound of acceptance, of surrender. Omoruyi's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and triumph as he realized that he had done it. He had tamed the dragon, not by force, but by understanding. The battle was over, but it had not been won through violence or destruction. It had been won through courage, patience, and wisdom. The dragon, now calm and docile, looked at Omoruyi with eyes full of gratitude, as though acknowledging that it had been freed from its own rage. Omoruyi, in turn, stood tall, his heart filled with pride. He had faced the Ashanti dragon, a creature that had terrorized his people for generations, and had emerged victorious, not as a conqueror, but as a healer. But Omoruyi knew that this was only the beginning. The real work had yet to come. He had to return to the village and prove that the dragon was no longer a threat, but a protector. It would not be easy. There would be those who still feared the creature, who would see it as a monster despite Omoruyi's victory. But Omoruyi was ready. He had faced the dragon's fury, and he had learned that true bravery was not in the fight, but in the courage to understand and seek peace. With the dragon now tamed, Omoruyi knew that his journey was far from over. The hardest part lay ahead, returning to his village, where the dragon had once been a terrifying force of destruction. He had seen the dragon's true nature, but the villagers were not so easily swayed. They had lived in constant fear of its fiery wrath for years, and convincing them that it was no longer a threat would take all of Omoruyi's courage and wisdom. As he descended the mountain with the dragon by his side, Omoruyi's mind raced. He had never doubted the dragon's capacity for peace, but he knew that many would not share his belief. There were those who would never accept the creature as anything but a monster, no matter how much Omoruyi explained. He had to prepare himself for the possibility that not everyone would welcome the dragon with open arms. The journey back to the village felt long, the weight of the task ahead heavy on Omoruyi's shoulders. The dragon walked behind him, its massive form casting a shadow over the savannah, but now there was a calmness to it. The once ferocious beast that had terrorized the land now walked silently, its fiery eyes no longer burning with rage, but with an understanding that mirrored Omoruyi's own. When they finally reached the village's outskirts, Omoruyi halted. He turned to the dragon and placed a hand on its side. "Stay here," he said softly. The dragon lowered its head in acknowledgement, its eyes locked with Omoruyi's. He could sense its trust in him, but the real test was yet to come. Omoruyi walked alone into the village, his heart pounding as he approached the gathering of elders and villagers who had once feared the beast. When they saw him, a murmur ran through the crowd. They had heard of his battle with the dragon, but none of them knew what to expect now. Would Omoruyi return victorious, or would the dragon have claimed him as another victim? "I have returned," Omoruyi said, his voice steady. "And the dragon is no longer a threat, it is tame, and it seeks only peace." The villagers looked at him with a mix of disbelief and fear. The elders were the first to speak, their eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You expect us to believe that the Ashanti dragon, who has brought nothing but destruction, is now at peace?" Omoruyi nodded. "Yes, I have seen the truth of the dragon's heart. It is not evil, but a creature trapped by its own rage. It was not seeking destruction, but was driven by loneliness and fear. I have helped it understand peace." There was a long silence as the villagers absorbed his words. Omoruyi could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the fear still lingering despite his reassurances. But there was something else as well, hope. A glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the dragon could be tamed. The villagers remained hesitant. Even after hearing Omoruyi's words, they couldn't erase the fear that had been ingrained in them for so many years. How could they trust a creature that had destroyed their crops and burned their homes? How could they accept that the dragon, which had once been the embodiment of terror, could now walk peacefully among them? Omoruyi knew that trust had to be earned, and it would take more than just words to convince the villagers. He had to show them that the dragon was not the monster they had once feared. The first step was to bring the dragon into the village, gently, cautiously, and with respect. Omoruyi led the dragon to the edge of the village, where the villagers had gathered to watch. At first, the sight of the dragon caused many to recoil in fear, their eyes wide with panic. The children clung to their parents, and the elders muttered prayers under their breath. But Omoruyi stood tall, his presence a calm force amidst the rising tension. "I understand your fear," he said to the villagers, "but I ask you to trust me. I have walked with the dragon, and I have seen its true heart. It is not a beast of destruction, but one of great power, capable of great good. Let us show it the same respect we show each other." The villagers were skeptical, but they did not move. The dragon stood silently behind Omoruyi, its massive form imposing but still. The tension in the air was palpable as Omoruyi stepped forward, his hand extended toward the dragon's side. Slowly, cautiously, he led the dragon into the village, step by step. As they walked, Omoruyi could see the villagers' reactions changing. The children, who had once been terrified of the dragon, now watched with wide eyes, their curiosity beginning to replace their fear. The elders, who had once seen the dragon as a symbol of destruction, now looked on with a more thoughtful expression. But it was the chief who had the most to say. "You are brave, Omoruyi," the chief said, his voice measured but tinged with uncertainty. "But this is still a creature of legend. It has taken much from us. How can we ever trust it again?" Omoruyi turned to face the chief. "It is not the dragon we need to fear anymore. It is the fear within us, the fear that has held us back from understanding it. I ask you, chief, to take the first step in showing the dragon the same trust you would show your own people." The chief's gaze softened. He had seen the transformation in Omoruyi. The young hunter who had once been a child was now a leader, a man who had faced the dragon and returned with wisdom. Slowly, he nodded. "Very well, I will trust you, Omoruyi. but you must show us that this dragon is no longer our enemy." With the chief's blessing, Omoruyi led the dragon to the center of the village. The villagers watched in silence as the creature stood, its eyes glowing with an almost peaceful light. For the first time, they saw the dragon not as a monster, but as something greater, an ancient being capable of great wisdom and power, but not a mindless destroyer. In the days that followed, the villagers began to see the dragon in a new light. Omoruyi worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the beast and his people, slowly integrating the dragon into the community. It did not harm the crops or destroy homes. Instead, it became a symbol of protection and strength. It helped the village by providing fire for warmth and cooking without the destructive blaze it once wielded. The dragon's once terrifying presence now became a comforting one, and the villagers began to realize that the creature they had feared could be a great ally. The children, once terrified, now approached the dragon with awe and wonder, touching its scales with reverence. The elders, too, began to share their stories with the dragon, teaching it the ways of their people. The beast, for its part, seemed to listen, its eyes softening with each passing day. It had found a new purpose, one that was no longer defined by destruction but by peace. Omoruyi stood at the village's edge, watching as his people and the dragon lived side by side. He had accomplished what many thought was impossible, not by brute force, but by understanding, by empathy, and by the courage to face his fears and the unknown. The Ashanti dragon was no longer a terror. It had become a guardian, a protector, and a symbol of the strength that came from unity. As the sun set over the village, Omoruyi turned to the dragon, who stood beside him, its eyes glowing with quiet contentment. Together, they had forged a new future, one where courage and understanding triumph over fear and violence. And in the quiet of the evening, Omoruyi knew that his journey was complete. The dragon had been tamed, not through battle, but through the strength of the heart. Years passed, and the legend of Omoruyi and the Ashanti dragon grew. The village flourished, no longer living in fear, but in harmony with the once feared creature. Omoruyi's name became synonymous with bravery and wisdom, and his tale was told to children and warriors alike. His legacy lived on, not just in the village, but in the hearts of all who heard his story. Omoruyi, now an elder himself, would sit by the fire and tell the children of the day he tamed the Ashanti dragon. He spoke not of the battle, but of the trust and compassion it took to understand the dragon. He spoke of the importance of facing one's fears, and of the power of peace over violence. His words became a guiding light for future generations, teaching them that even the most terrifying of enemies could be understood, and that true strength came not from the sword, but from the heart. And as for the dragon, it remained a loyal protector of the village, its mighty wings a constant reminder of the power of peace. Together, Omoruyi and the dragon had shown the world that even the fiercest of creatures could be tamed, not by force, but by understanding and love. The story of Omoruyi, the brave hunter who tamed the Ashanti dragon, would be remembered for centuries to come. A story of courage, wisdom, and the transformative power of peace. As we wait for part 2, subscribe on my channel and like the video. Thanks.